Record and go live here, everybody.
Okay, we're about to go live. Maybe we're live now. So I'm going to do a quick little spiel about Impact 100. So our mission at Impact 100 is to empower women to dramatically improve lives by collectively funding significant grants that make a lasting impact in our community. Wow, apparently I've not prepared enough for this. But the way it works is women join at either $500 or $1,000 level. Then we pool those monies into grants of at least $100,000. And then local nonprofits are asked to submit a grant application within one of our 5 focus areas, which are family, health and wellness, education, culture, and then environment, recreation, and preservation. Our members then come together to review the grant applications, perform financial analysis, do site visits, and ultimately select our grant finalists. In September, at our annual award celebration, the finalists present their transformational project, and our members vote right there at the event, and the grants are awarded. We partner then fairly long-term as an organization with our grant recipients between 1 and 3 years while they get their transformational project off the ground. Since our inception in 2001, we've awarded over $5 million to local nonprofits for a total of 47 transformational projects of at least $100,000, which is pretty amazing. And I like to always kind of end with what I think makes Impact 100 special. The first is that 100% of the member dollars go to the grant pool. So 100% of all member monies go back out into the community to do really great work. 2, our members can be as involved or uninvolved as they choose to be. It's a build your own adventure organization. You can pay your membership and trust that the rest of the other members will do great work stewarding your money, or you can be president. It runs the gamut. So, and then that kind of parlays into my last thing that I think is pretty impressive is we are a 100% working board. We have no actual paid staff. We have one hard-working outsourced administrator who helps us part-time. We couldn't do it without her, but other than that, it's 24 women making this organization run, which is pretty impressive. And then before we turn it over to the stars of the show, I just want to thank our sponsors. With 100% of our member dollars going to our grant pool, you can imagine that we have $0 starting out every year for our operating expenses. So we couldn't do this work without them. And so just take a moment to recognize them. You can find them on the front page of our website, and look for sponsor spotlights coming in our newsletter as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Becky Sheeler, our wonderful host for today.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everybody, for coming today. I appreciate it. And I'm excited, especially excited to introduce Cincinnati Works, because I've had the honor to volunteer as a mock interviewer. I started doing that over 10 years ago with Vicki by my side. And then from there, I had the privilege to sit on some of the board committees. And right now, today, or not today especially, but currently working very closely with Matt as he's leading an awesome group in the Workforce Connection, which we're going to hear more about. But I just think that Matt and his team have done terrific work. I'm, again, very privileged to have the honor to be able to witness some of the great things that they're doing for our community and those that are working hard to get to self-sufficiency. So thanks. I'll turn it over to Matt, the Vice President and General Manager at Cincinnati Works.
Thank you, Becky. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. Well, we are really grateful to have the opportunity to talk with you all today and share just a little bit more about Cincinnati Works for those of you that aren't as familiar, and then also to tell you about some of the great work that we've been doing on our transformational project and how we are significantly improving lives in the community, because we really feel incredibly passionate about this work, that we are living into that mission and those goals that Impact 100 has. And I'm fortunate to also have the person who's, on the ground delivering this work. We've got Chris Sutton on the call, who introduced himself earlier, who we've dubbed as our Impact 100 coach. And he'll be telling you guys a little bit more about what the work that he does is like on the ground in a little bit. Just to start, I do have just a couple kind of content slides to introduce you to Cincinnati Works, tell you a little bit more. Stacy, I'm pushing the share screen button, but it looks like that has been disabled. I don't know if there's any way to get that back, or otherwise I'll just talk to it itself.
Matt, I've made you a co-host, so hopefully that should clear it
Great.
up.
Yep, I've got it now. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me just share this. And I won't dwell on this too long here, because the real fun will be hearing from Chris, right? But when you think about Cincinnati Works, really our mission, we are a workforce development organization, as you probably got from the icebreaker here. And our mission is to partner, I don't know, is anyone else seeing this blocked? Is it blocked, or is that just my screen in the video? Hide the thumbnail video. To partner with all willing and capable people living in poverty to assist them in advancing to economic self-sufficiency through employment. That's a big mouthful, but basically we are working not just to alleviate poverty, but to eliminate poverty, and to do that through work. And there's actually, we believe that that's a very important distinction, eliminating poverty versus alleviating poverty. Our job is to help people. Our founders, Dave and Leanne Phillips, like to say this is all about teaching someone to fish in the truest sense. And when you think about the things that really differentiate Cincinnati Works, you'll see them listed along the bottom here, right? The folks that come through our door that are looking for work, they are lifetime members, right? We provide them free lifetime coaching for as long as they want to continue to engage with us. And we really think that that's critical, because the journey out of poverty to economic self-sufficiency is a long one. There are simply no quick fixes in this work. We provide job readiness training, and we believe in the holistic wraparound supports, because this is very much, the individuals that we are working with and supporting, our members, if they have one problem, they have many. And what we also like to say is a job is often a problem creator rather than a problem solver. And you can think about that in something very basic like childcare. When you don't have a job, you don't have to worry about childcare. When you get a job, all of a sudden that becomes a problem to keeping a job. So we really believe that our model is one of our significant differentiators. Our two-customer approach, which you'll hear more about in a little bit, we think is also critical. We are supporting our members, but when we are really doing our job correctly, we have both our members and our employers in mind, where we are making that and facilitating those connections that work best with both of them. And we think our culture of data-driven innovation, right? We are obsessed with data. We are constantly looking at what our results are showing us to figure out what's working and what's not, so we can pivot. So that's just a basic introduction to Cincinnati Works. The transformational project that we referenced is all about, it's a service that is called workforce coaching. And to give you a little bit of background for how this all started, right? Looking back, roughly around 2016, we had three main insights. The first one was really operational, right? And that was when we looked at our members and tried to see, for the ones that were struggling and, really trying to work their way out of poverty, they were having difficulty accessing support services once they're employed. It's kind of silly when you think about this one, but it's the fact that a lot of social service agencies and the services they provide are only available during normal working business hours. But what's happening during normal business working hours is that most of our members are working. So there was this disconnect between, they still needed many of these support services while they were working, but they weren't able to access them. It was, again, kind of this notion of a job being a problem creator, right? So that was number one. The second one was really very situational. And when we were looking at the tightening labor market, which, really was happening largely up until a few months ago for the last, 8+ years, it was causing a surge in turnover among employers who were really struggling to keep their people, because people could jump from job to job for just a slightly higher wage, or because they could get another job relatively easily. So that was number two. And then the third insight was that, and this one is really kind of the linchpin, is that when we looked broadly across people in our community who are living in poverty, more than half of those people who are living in poverty are already working, already have at least one job. And for us, these three things came together to tell us that there was this population around the working poor that needed support, that needed our help, but we were having difficulty accessing them because they were working. So what that led to was the development of this concept in the service that we call workforce coaching, right, which has become a social enterprise for us. And this is where we bring the services that we've been delivering for over 20 years, for 24 years now in workforce development and coaching, we bring them on site to an employer, so that we can support their entire workforce, right? And helping them with the same kinds of challenges and issues, but not just issues, but supporting them through goals and figuring out what are the things that they want for themselves and for their family, and how can we help them and coach them through to those things. And on top of that, it's not just our coaches and our functional specialists, but we also bring with us our whole network of community resources that we've built. You can think of them as our referral partners, over 23 years. So when someone needs housing, right, we have those resources. When someone needs childcare, we know where to go to point them to, depending on where they live, right, and on where they work. We bring all of that expertise with us to help the employers and all of their employees so that they can stabilize and grow. And what this produces for the business is they see lower costs in terms of reduced turnover. They see increased productivity and revenue from the fact that they now have a fully productive workforce who are not missing days, but are able to help produce more of what they're creating. We see reduced risk, employers not at risk of losing customers because they can't make things because people aren't there, they have open roles, and greater employee engagement, right? That the employees recognize that their employers are providing this, basically as an add-on to their employee benefits. And so how this works, right? When we look at it, we think about this workforce coaching as crisis management, helping them to stabilize, and then helping an individual move to career advancement. And this is the graphic that I really like to share that kind of shows what this looks like in a nutshell, right? Our workforce coach is on site at the employer to be able to help its employees manage these issues one-on-one, right? It's personalized, right? This is not just kind of like, here's a phone number you call that has someone that might be able to help you. This is someone that has gotten to know these individuals personally and understands their personal circumstances and really individualizes the solutions. That I would say is one of the big things that we've learned at Cincinnati Works, is that no two people's situations or circumstances are the same. And that means that no solutions are going to be the same. So the workforce coach then facilitates interaction with our functional specialists. So if someone they're working with needs help with finances, we have a financial coach. If they're suffering through something like addiction or just depression, right? A lot of these things that can be debilitating from a mental health perspective, we have a counselor that they can work with. We have a legal coordinator that can help them work through, a variety of things. You can think about those as, working through custody for children as one example, and, other kind of legal things that they're dealing with. And then I referenced the community resource network as well, right? Housing, childcare, transportation, food security are just a few of the many things that our coaches bring to the table. So just to kind of, put a bit of a bow on this, our pitch to these employers is that, we're able to help them see insights into the real issues that their workforce are dealing with. A lot of times individuals can be reticent to bring up an issue to HR or to a supervisor because they're really personal in nature. And it's uncomfortable talking about financial issues with really close friends, much less with HR or a supervisor. And so that's really the goal of what our coaches are trying to do, is to build the trust with these individuals, these people, to help them dig into what really are the problems and how can we help them work through those and get to a place where they're thriving. We've got a community of 10 employers that we're continuing to grow, and we just remain really excited about the prospects for all of this. So, I think I've kind of given you the sense of the, how we are significantly improving lives, from the transformational project perspective. And what the Impact 100 grant really allows us to do is it serves as our investment for growth, right? The Impact 100 grant is essentially allowing us to go out and hire an additional coach to help us to hire Chris, basically, and so that we can then grow the service, putting him at an employer that will then become self-sufficient as Chris builds his caseload of employers, and that is producing it's a fee for service arrangement. So Impact 100 is essentially our seed capital that we use to continue to grow this. And I'm happy to say that we have added, even amidst all of the coronavirus issues, we have added some new employers since our grant. Continental Building Products, you'll see listed on there. And then one of our biggest ones, which is a very recent news, is DHL. DHL has an enormous facility out at near the airport, and we're very excited to begin partnering with them on what we think will be a huge initiative. They have, you think about the scope of of lives that we may be impacting. They have between 3,000 and 4,000 people that are working out at the airport alone, and so our coaches will be out there and able to help like that, literally thousands of people every day, which we are really excited about. So some great progress I feel like that we're making here. So with that, I feel like that's the overview. But to really get a sense, I think, of the service, Chris, I'd love to have you share a little bit more about your experience, the things that you've seen since you started, and just kind of what your day looks like on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I mean, do we want to have any questions before I go, or
sure, we can pause there and see if anyone has any questions to start.
Let's see first.
I have one. How do you get your message out regarding your services?
Yeah, great question. So we are working right now specifically on a marketing plan. A lot of it has come through, Cincinnati Works has this kind of the group of employer partners that we've worked with over the years. And so that kind of is a foundational starting point for this service that, we can work through them. But, we know that that's only a small subset of, who we could reach and where the need is for this in the community. So we're actually working on a bigger marketing plan that we can help to get the word out. But talking to groups like this, honestly, I've been out talking to the Rotary groups in a couple different places. We partner with the Chamber of Commerce. We are, we're looking and exploring for a lot of ways to get the word out for it. I see a question from Jenny. Do we have an ideal employer customer or size? Great question. So I would say the main things that we look for right now in an employer, there is, the way the service works right now with the on-site coach, there is kind of a critical mass in terms of employer size that we look for, which I would say, is somewhere around, 80 to 100 people to start, frontline workers. If you get any smaller than that, we have done some smaller cases, but it's tough for a coach to regularly engage. There's almost not as enough work, but we find that you start to hit about 70, 80 to 100 people, and that's really where you begin to take off. And then it goes up from there, right, to, you know, the DHLs that have several thousand people that they're working for. You know, we do look to partner with organizations that, you know, share similar values around their people and, you know, treating their people as an asset to be developed over time. So, is Amazon too big to be our customer? No, they are not. We do not have a ceiling on our size limit. So, you know, we'll and they are right out next to DHL. So we're kind of hoping that, you know, maybe we can have that conversation as well. So yes, yeah, absolutely. We would not fall short of that. So we love talking to like Amazon, Kroger, you know, those are our big, some big targets for us. And, you know, we think we can help, right? I mean, that's the bottom line, is that we think when you look at frontline workforce, and especially I think today, you know, even though the labor market isn't necessarily as tight as it was before, I would say that, and Chris can speak to this a little bit, but the need for mental health support, you know, with the stress of what it means to be on site, and think about this notion of essential workers, right? I mean, that is who we are supporting, right? This essential workforce that has been working every day through this pandemic. That is our target, right? Those are the people that we're looking to help. And there's quite frankly a need, because it's taking its toll. And so we think we have a big role to play. Current coaches, how many coaches do you currently have? So we have 3 right now. So Chris is our newest and our third, but we are growing our service as we are adding employers, right? So that kind of gets to the investment that Impact 100 is helping us to do.
Hey, Matt, this is Karen. Hi, everybody from Cincinnati Works. I just want to make sure everybody understands also that Matt's just talking about our Workforce Connection program. So 3 coaches with Workforce Connection, but overall, there are about 14 coaches at Cincinnati Works. So doing other work with employers, but not the Workforce Connection embedded coach. We have other coaches as well.
Yep.
Oh, I see. Let's see if my question's the same one as the one in the chat. Lisa's. I had a quick question of, you know, on your last slide, you had maybe like 10 barriers or struggles, I will say, to the average employee. And when you show the employer that the most common struggle is finance, and you're working with these people that live in poverty, what is their common response to that number, and like how are they, do you work with them to try and change that pay scale or hours, or you know?
Yeah, so it's the wage conversation is one that I would say you have to treat delicately, and you have to really kind of feel out where the relationship is. I mean, part of this role in this service is, you know, in the same way that we don't tell an individual what to do. You know, our job as coaches is to kind of coach them there. We take a similar approach with our employer relationships, is that, you know, we know they know their business a lot better than we do. They know their market a lot better than we do. What we can do is we can talk to them about impacts and implications. So we will have employers that will say to us, how do my wages compare in the market based on what you see Cincinnati Works? And we can say, well, you know, kind of like a standard of like, we see X jobs or X similar jobs at, you know, this $1 an hour threshold. Or, you know, taking some examples from companies that are similar to theirs, here's what we see. You know, you're either in line, you're a little above, you're a little below. And, you know, the employers can start to come to their own conclusions about what that means and what they need to do to stay competitive. You know, to the question about, you know, the issues, a lot of the things with financial, wage certainly is a part of that, but oftentimes and financial, just as a frame of reference, is almost always the top one for the populations that we're dealing with. But, I think that speaks more to like the circumstances that they're coming from, having, accumulated in some cases a fair amount of debt. How can they budget, right? I mean, a lot of this stuff is how do I set a basic budget for myself? And again, Chris can, I think, speak to some of that for what that looks like. But it's amazing when you work with someone to get a budget in place, how that can be freeing to say like, okay, like here's what I need, here's what I have, here's what I need to spend it on, here are the things that I need to pay down. And once I've paid those things down, here's how I can work back toward the goals that I want to achieve. But yeah, it's a great question, and it is sometimes a delicate dance. Let's see, question about Northern NKY. Can the chamber help to grow? Yes, through the Grow NKY. Yeah, absolutely. So I would love to have a conversation where we're always looking into connections for how we can build and expand this. Question from June about, has COVID changed the way you coach? So short answer is yes. It did. So when things were really happening kind of early mid-March, we pulled our coaches off site. I think it was probably like the third week of March, really, when kind of emergency orders were happening. And we were able to shift very quickly into an entirely virtual model where the coaches were still interacting with people, and they do this even in their current jobs, through email, phone, text, like, that channel of conversation is already happening. We just wound up having to rely on that a little bit more. And that was a challenge. And what that has done is that has really pointed us to this concept of virtual or remote coaching is one that we're going to be looking to invest more in, so that now we're in a place where, because we have protective measures in place, we're outfitting the coaches with PPE, they've all got face masks, they've got hand sanitizer to clean their space. We're going back on site, not in all cases, but in the cases where the employers are ready for us, we are going back on site and appropriately equipped so that they stay safe, because that is our main goal. But that's also shown us that we need to build in the capabilities so that if this happens again, where we get a huge surge, and employers are saying, or we say, we need to pull them back off site, that we can do that. The good news is that we also think that's an opportunity to start expanding to smaller employers. So I talked about like that, kind of 70 to 80 person threshold, but our next kind of phase of growth, we think, is also in building a virtual coaching model where it may not be a coach on site, but it's still a resource. We're providing the same resources to smaller or maybe more distributed employers, right? Where an employer may have a few people in a lot of different locations where it wouldn't make sense to have one coach on site, but you can have those people contact someone virtually. These are great questions. Does everyone you work with need to have a high school diploma and a clean police record? No. So that, I think, falls more for our workforce development side of our business, where we're working with folks who are looking for work. So, my part of the organization is the folks that are already employed and where we're providing this on-site coaching service. But on our workforce development side, no. And in fact, many of our members come in and they don't have a diploma or a GED, and that is some of the work that they do to help them, is to get that credential. And for clean police records, definitely not. So we take folks with criminal records, misdemeanor, felony. Our main goal is, as long as the record is not so severe that that it's going to prohibit someone from getting a job, we have employer partners. And in fact, one of our big organizational changes last year, I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with Beacon of Hope, but that is an organization that started out of Nehemiah Manufacturing, that focuses on how we build more opportunities, job opportunities for people with kind of extensive criminal records, and Cincinnati Works took on that operation back in the fall. So that's something that we are constantly looking at, is how can we continue to promote that kind of gospel of second chance hiring.
One of our important partners is Ohio Justice and Policy Center with our workforce development folks too. So
I've done too much talking, I think. Chris, why don't you jump in? I'd love to kind of have you give them a sense of like what your day looks like, type of things you see, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll try to keep it brief. I could go on for an hour about all the different things that I do in my day-to-day. But I guess to kind of give you the broadest overview of what a workforce connection coach is the best way, the most applicable way that most folks understand is I'm essentially like an on-site social worker. And I know sometimes social worker can come with a negative stigma attached to it. But basically like what we do is we go on site and try to help the employees remove any type of barriers that they might be facing. We try to assist with any type of, the kind of word we use for it is fires that come up. We try to, put those out, remove barriers that might be in their day-to-day life. But one thing that we do that's a little bit different as coaches is we also work to help advance folks, whether that be professionally, whether that be financially, whether that be through health and fitness. So the scope of the things that we do, I mean, it's an incredibly broad scope. And it all kind of funnels into the same type of coaching where it's just trying to help folks become the best versions of themselves, whatever that might look like. So it's really hard to place like what a typical day-to-day looks like because there really isn't much of a typical day, but usually there's a place that we show up. I'll give you kind of a 30,000 foot view is that we go on site. Usually it's once a week, sometimes twice a week. And what my typical day-to-day is when I come in, I go, I say hey to everybody. I make sure that my presence is known, that they see me walking around in the facility, say hey to everybody. And then if I've got any appointments, I'll make sure to remind the individual that I've set up appointments with them, and just double check and make sure they're still able to meet with me. And then usually my like quote unquote office will be somewhere that's set up in a visible area where I'm accessible. I try not to, squeeze myself into, a corner office or anything where folks have to, take off, where it's, relatively difficult to find me. I try to be as accessible as possible. And then we do what's called rounds. So if I'm sitting in my office doing paperwork or researching something or creating a case plan, what I'll do is after, every hour or so, what I'll do is I'll get up and I'll just kind of go around the facility and check in with people. And again, just kind of make sure people know that I'm there physically, remind people that I'm there. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the very broad based view of what I do. When I'm not interacting with somebody face to face, doing a check-in, I'm doing research, I'm doing paperwork, I'm, doing other things for other sites. Like if I've got one site that's particularly slow one week, I'll use that other site to be doing research and paperwork for another site. So it's tough to block things off in specific times. It's really kind of just you get to things as they come to you, and so yeah, I guess that's kind of a good way to describe kind of what my typical day to day is. I know that that's not the most informative thing, but it is tough to describe kind of what we do on a specific level because everything is so varied.
Chris, why don't you zoom in on a story or two? I think that might help illuminate it a little bit.
Yeah, so one example, or I could give a couple, but one example in particular that I think kind of defines what we do as coaches very well is at BPI, I was working with an individual and he was getting up there in points, which obviously is a red flag. That could mean a million different things is going on in that individual's life. So after building a little bit of a rapport with this individual, what we found out was that really everything in his life, nothing had changed much. He was just having some health issues. So he was utilizing FMLA. However, the way that he was utilizing his FMLA didn't line up with the policy that the company had insofar as like days he could take off with points. And he basically just wasn't filling out his paperwork correctly. So he was about to get fired. And what I did was basically said, all right, we're going to like cut the middleman out. We're going to, cut me going to HR coming back, this and that. So what I did was I basically just said, all right, we're just going to set up a meeting between everybody and get this thing hashed out and figured out, because clearly there's some miscommunication going on somewhere along the line. So all I did was I set up a meeting, and within 15 minutes, we had basically hashed everything out that needed to be done with this individual's FMLA. It turned out that there was one specific part of the paperwork for the time off he wasn't filling out correctly. And once he figured out how to do that, he ended up losing about half of his points, but has been in good standing with the company since. So that's one of those examples of where sometimes all you have to do is just get people, just coaching people together in a room. I had a little bit of a coaching session with the individual prior. He is, for lack of better terms, a very gruff individual, doesn't handle things very tactfully, and has a tendency to get frustrated very quickly. So I part of what I did with coaching was just gave him some pointers on how to navigate his discussion with HR prior to going in there. And he did utilize a lot of those things when he went into the coaching session, or when he went into the session with HR. So again, that's one of those kind of clear-cut examples of how sometimes all it does is it just takes a little bit of networking and a little bit of coaching to be able to, set someone up to where they're not getting fired for something that was easily avoidable. He was a great employee. He's been with the company for 30 some odd years. He's still with them, and now he's actually in better standing now than he was prior. So.
Chris, what about the one with where you helped him with the clerical error? Do you remember that one? It was like it was a court issue.
Oh yes.
You found.
Mm-hmm.
I love that one.
Yeah. So there's another individual at the at that same site, and what had occurred was, he had been having some issues financially. Unfortunately, he had an autoimmune issue, as did his wife, and his insurance, like the way his medication changed, his insurance wasn't quite able to cover it. And so he had to basically dip into his savings. Then what occurred was he ended up having to write a bad check, because it was between paying for his mortgage or paying for his medications. And when you've got both himself and his wife, who are both dealing with severe medical issues, he made, what maybe we don't say is the best choice, but made a choice that he was going to make to be able to keep a roof over his head and keep his, medications up to date. Then kind of the kicker for the whole thing was the court that he was dealing with had from the initial charge that he had from writing the bad check, had ended up overcharging him for his his court fines and fees. They set up like a payment plan, and what had occurred was we got him all set up financially with everything. So how to pay his medication, how to pay his rent, his mortgage. Budgeted out for his groceries and everything. Got all that set up, and then what happened was the court ended up kicking up his fees by over 300%. So he was paying, a couple $100 and ended up paying almost $1,000. Well, he was about ready to give up at this point. And so what we did was got him in contact with the Dearborn County courts, and we basically, long story short, through about 2.5 weeks worth of meetings, back and forths, networking, so on and so forth, we ended up discovering that the clerk had made a clerical error on the already agreed upon decision of what his payment plan was going to be. Basically just added an extra zero to what his payments were going to be. And once they found that out, not only did they dismiss his further charges, but they ended up actually reimbursing him for the charges that he had previously overpaid. And then since then, we've kept him in financial services. But yeah, that's another example of where, sometimes folks may not make the best decisions, but that sometimes there can also be mistakes that happen on the other end where they may not know how to navigate it. And when it feels like everything's falling apart, and you don't know who to turn to, you're not going to be able to turn to your work. You don't have time outside of work to be able to handle this on your own. So BPI was gracious enough to allow him time during his shift without having to clock out or anything to be able to handle this stuff while he was on site with me. And then we were able to get it all sorted out. So.
Yeah, I mean, that was one to me, and Chris, I think, had spotted that kind of clerical, the likelihood of a clerical error, and I think, yeah, the comment from Bethany about advocacy on top of coaching, I think, is very true. Is that, you know, we are helping to advocate. You know, folks like Chris are doing a great deal of advocacy for these individuals, right? Who, you know, in a situation like that, there was no fault of their own, and all of a sudden, you know, their financial world seemed to fall apart, and it's just, it's, you know, it feels like it is literally salvaging like someone's livelihood, um, and it is very powerful. Any other questions or comments? Love the engagement in the chat too. Yeah.
I have a quick question. Do you
Okay.
create sort of peer groups on the site work where you're going and working? Or are they able to build a network amongst each other as well to be able to lean on during these situations?
Let me just touch on that briefly, and then Chris, I'll hand it over to you. You know, from like a principal's perspective, we try and keep the individual interactions with a coach to be confidential, just because of the highly personal nature that a lot of these, you know, as he kind of touched on, you're getting into things like finances and health. And, you know, we also don't want there to be a stigma associated with, you know, from a peer perspective of, you know, needing the help of the coach, which, you know, is something we still have to work past. But it's a really interesting concept. I mean, Chris, I don't know what you would say to that question.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great. So, Bethany, are you asking like, do we create kind of like peer support networks outside of just the coaching role in and of itself?
Yes, I just think about how when you're talking about advocacy and how something like that can really just put you underwater. So we're glad that that you're there, but where else can they sort of reach from people with the same maybe lived experiences and build upon, building a sort of community amongst each other as well? That was my thought.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think to kind of touch on Matt's point a little bit, there's kind of some external factors that we don't really have control over. One of them being just the overall culture of where you're working. If anyone's ever been out to Dearborn County and then imagine working in like a foundry, you can imagine the culture there is pretty conservative, pretty, kind of we mind our own business, and, we're buddies with who we work with. We don't really talk about anything personal type of thing. And that can change amongst sites. And ultimately, like what Matt touched on at the beginning of our presentation, is we want to make sure that we help build people with self-sufficiency, ultimately is our end goal. But to kind of refocus back on peer support groups, what we really do is difficult for us because we're doing so much individual work. We don't typically do works in groups or like anything like a financial work. I mean, we do like financial workshops and stuff like that. And, we try to normalize the fact that, you're not the only person dealing with this. There's several other people also dealing with whatever you might be dealing with, or wanting to, maybe you're not dealing with any problems at all, but there's other people that are also looking to improve their finances or, get that bigger house or that better car, or whatever it might be. Everyone's trying to move up a little bit. So what we do in that is also, again, just try to normalize the engagement to know that, when you get sent to the coach or when you meet with the coach, it's not like going to the principal's office where you're in trouble. It's solely about improving whatever situation is that you might be dealing with. And so really what our big push is, and we have to get buy-in, and we luckily have a good support system from our current employers, is top-down buy-in that, it's okay to go to the coach. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're in trouble or that you're about to get fired or that you're incapable of handling your own life by yourself. And what we do is when we have like quote unquote success stories, we, tepidly push those people to let their other folks know that they're working with, that it's okay to go meet with us. And we notice that as we move into coaching, usually there's not engagement right away. There's usually a bit of a stigma with it. But once we've been in a site for long enough and had enough success stories, going to the coach just becomes a normal thing. I can think of a couple of sites that I don't go to, but that other coaches have had, where going to the coach is just like, oh yeah, I'm going to go see the coach, I'll be right back type thing. And it's just a normal, regular part of it. It's like taking a break, going to lunch, any other thing like that. So
It's a really interesting suggestion, though. So thank you for that, Bethany. And Vicki, do you want to take the question about if someone wants to volunteer?
Thank you, Matt. Yes, I do. Frankly, it's pretty simple. Just reach out to Vicki Mertz at Cincinnati Works, and it's vmertz@cincinnatiworks.org, and we can talk about what opportunities we have. Right now we're doing everything virtually with our mock interviews, et cetera, only because we want to keep our members safe, our volunteers safe, and we want to be respectful of what's happening in the communities and in the world. So right now we're doing it virtually. However, that won't last forever, I'm confident. And we have volunteer opportunities to help with resume, to create those, and also to do mock interviews. And throughout the year, we have a couple different special events. Maybe it's a job fair. We have 2 job fairs every year, unless there's COVID and then one gets canceled. But we have 2 job fairs, and historically, we anticipate 1,000 people in attendance. So we can have volunteers do multiple things and various things. So we're always welcome. And frankly, if someone is interested in coming forward and looking at our curriculum and they see something that they know they're a specialist in, or they can shine in the classroom, we'd love to talk to you about that and maybe find out if you'd be interested in teaching a module. So there's all kinds of things, but just reach out to vmertz@cincinnatiworks.org, and I'll get back to you ASAP. Thanks.
I have a quick question, just as far as if at the food pantry, if we were to have a client that we thought could really take advantage of the services, help with the resume and all that, once they would contact Cincinnati Works, are they then assigned a coach right up front that sees them through the entire process? Is that how it works?
Mostly, yeah. So we have an intake process that will kind of assess them up front, and yeah, a coach assignment is part of that, right? Yep.
Chris, about how many people are you working with a week? I mean, how many people do you have to keep track of and follow up with?
Yeah, so across our 10 employers, so just to give you some sense, so last year in 2019, we worked with, I want to say it was right over about 400 people total. So, roughly what we target is over the course of a year, we want to hit about 30% of a workforce. And when you think about it, that is, and that's going to be a mix of people that will have come in, like some will come in kind of like, I've got this one thing that I just need some help with, versus the folks that are working on an ongoing basis of, they might be working toward a promotion, right? And saying like, what do I continually need to do, and have some regular check-ins. So I would say it really depends on the size of the employer. But we think that a coach, can handle, a caseload of, roughly looking at like across employers. So, we have the coaches on site 1 day a week. So leaving kind of Friday is an open day. So 4 days a week, usually somewhere around like 100 to 200 people is like a available caseload. Yeah. So it's a lot, but they're really good. I mean, we have the coaches we have are outstanding. And I think, Chris is a testament to that. He's going to be starting at his newest employer in 2 weeks here too. So he'll be close to getting full pretty shortly. So, I'm just very excited to come on this call and be able to share that we've amidst everything going on, we do have a good story to tell.
Yeah, I think, I mean, on behalf of everyone here, we're just so happy that, the other women in our organization can fund, another role like that at your organization. It's very powerful. And Yeah, it's wonderful. Very, very happy that we get to partner with you guys. Looks like we got a few more questions, and we'll try and wrap it up here because I don't want to keep anyone too late past 1. Matt or Chris, do you want to grab any of these?
Sure. So Jenny has asked, how many more employers do we hope to add in 2020? So we would love to add. I will say, if you'd asked me this question in January, I'd have given you a much different answer. I think we're looking right now of whether we can add, 3 to 4 more, I think realistically the rest of the year. If we can do more than that, we will certainly take it. But, just kind of, we're trying to be realistic with the labor market and the business climate. Yes, and nonprofits, we do work with some nonprofit organizations too. So yep, that's absolutely a possibility. Well, thank you so much for having us. I'm happy to stick around for any more questions, but we love the work you guys do. We think it's fantastic. You guys have been just such tremendous partners with us. And and I look forward to giving more good updates in the future.
Yes, definitely a pleasure. I'm going to do a quick wrap up here, and then like Matt said, please stick around if you guys have any other questions for them. But for those of you that are not currently Impact members, I just wanted to quickly kind of go through with you how you could become a member. Quickly, here are some of our sponsors that Sarah Grace thanked earlier. And again, just a quick overview of who we are. But essentially, every member can become a member by donating either $1,000 or $500. And that would get you a half vote or a full vote towards where our $100,000 grants go to each year. And our membership dues are just, we ask those be in by December 31st. So then we can tell our nonprofits how many grants we'll be awarding for the following year. And our members can pay by various methods. And also you can do one-time payment, monthly, quarterly, whatever works for you. And finally, thank you again for coming today. If you want to learn more about Impact 100, we have a few other events coming up, and I don't have them all listed here, but obviously we have other live events on Thursdays. The Step Up series is essentially the same thing, but outside, getting exercise with our nonprofits. So that's been very popular. And unfortunately, I don't know how, but somehow I've missed our Meet the Finalists. So the nonprofits who have applied for grants, we've narrowed it down, and we'll get to meet those nonprofits on July 17th, which I think is a Friday, Sarah Grace, at noon. And I think that's the end of my little spiel here. Thanks everyone for coming. And again, stay if you guys want to ask some more questions, have any more comments. Looks like Sarah Grace added the registration link to meet the finalists. That's going to be virtual. So it should be a fun little experiment for us to moderate so many of our members in one virtual space.